for attending a nice cold day and looking forward to some rain here in a day or so. And for those people who are standing, there's plenty of seats. Just, we got a lot in the front row where we'd like to sit down, but it might be more comfortable for you. We'll start off with the pledge. Director Donato, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God and indivisible with liberty and justice for all.
And Holly Hughes present.
Okay, thank you. That'll move us on to item number 4, voluntary public roll call. Those that are listening in, we always like to hear who may be joining us. So if you'd care, just please identify yourself.
White Fence 3, Jack Cephas.
Hey, Jack, welcome.
Thank you.
George, it's John. You can sit.
John, glad you're with us.
Ben Stewart, Roseland Community Service District.
Welcome, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public, comments. And if this item is not on the agenda, you're free to make public comments at this time. But if you're here for an agenda item, which I think most of you are, you'll have an opportunity after the speaker. So is there anybody who wish to address the board? An item that's not on the agenda, now's the time to do so. Okay, we'll move on to adoption of agenda. That's Board Order 6A1.
Mr. President, this is Rob. I move we adopt the agenda.
We have a motion by Director Ferris.
Seconded.
Second by Director Donato. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary.
Audrey Miller. Yes. Robert Ferris.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy. Yes. Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. We'll move on to consent calendar 7A1. We just have one item, approval of the minutes of January 28th. So a motion would be in order.
Mr. President, I'll move approval.
Can we have a motion?
Director Miller, second.
Director Miller, we have a second. If there's no further comments or questions, all in favor, excuse me, Madam Secretary.
Audrey Miller. Yes. Robert Ferris.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Gary Van Dam. George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Now we're getting to the item I think most of you are here for, under new business. It's for information and discussion only, and we'll turn it over to our General Manager, Matt, if you'd please go to introduce our speaker.
All right. Thank you, Director Lane, President Lane, and members of the board. Good evening. Agenda item 8A1 is an information only item. So just a reminder to all those present today, we won't be taking any action on this item. And before I invite our guest speaker to the podium, I wanted to provide a little bit of background. As you know, AVAC's heard a couple of different presentations on the Delta Conveyance Project that's being proposed by DWR, Department of Water Resources. After those presentations, AVAC staff provided some feedback to DWR staff on questions that the AVAC board has brought up and some of the concerns of various board members regarding the Delta Conveyance Project. To date, AVAC has contributed about $13.8 million, or 3.95% of the planning and environmental costs on the project. The 3.95% is calculated based on AVAC's proportionate share of our Table A in the total state water project Table A. In the coming months, AVAC board will be asked to make a decision regarding AVAC's continued participation in the Delta Conveyance Project towards the ongoing planning and design costs through the year 2027. If AVAC decides to participate and keep our seat at the table over the next 2 years, while DWR works through the planning and design and permitting costs or process on the project, AVAC will be asked to commit roughly $11.8 million over the next 2 years. Just under $5 million in 2026 and just under $7 million in 2027. AVAC's final decision on the participation in the project will not have to be made until mid-2027. If AVAC does choose to participate in the interim funding over the next 2 years, staff would work with the board and provide all the information the board needs to provide a final decision on participation in the project through various workshops that would be open to the public. Regardless of AVAC's final decision on the participation in the project in 2027, DWR has committed to refund all the planning and design costs that AVAC has contributed to date once the project is fully bonded for construction. So this evening we have Ms. Karma Nemeth, who is the director of DWR for the Department of Water Resources, and she has graciously agreed to attend the meeting this evening and provide an update on the project and answer any questions the board and public may have regarding the Delta Conveyance project. So at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Nemeth up to the podium and introduce herself.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much. It's really my pleasure to be here, and thank you for the gracious welcome. I'm a little self-conscious when I say I don't know that I've actually made a visit to this boardroom. So this is good timing because there's been so much work underway, not just with this project, but with the State Water Project kind of writ large. And this is one of the centerpieces. And I want to thank you for your support to date and your interest in this project and the really good questions that you have been asking of my team. It's really through this board interaction where we understand what's most on your mind. And I'm confident that through that interaction, we make a better project. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the information that is coming to the department. We put together something that's called a delivery capability report. We put this together every 2 years, and it helps us take a look at all the various pressures on the State Water Project, changing hydrologic patterns, where we are with our infrastructure, how we invest in our asset management plan, and we combine that with the demands of all of our contractors to determine what we think the delivery reliability is of the State Water Project. And so we've had, certainly in the past 8+ years or so, hydrology that is really shifting. These past couple of years, we have months during what is our traditional wet season that have become bone dry. I think we're all working off a really dry January. And then it switches to something that gets very wet. So we've had a few great storms in February, good. A little bit warm. If I could wave a wand, I'd want there to be a little more snow, a little less precipitation. But it's how we shift back and forth in these patterns and use our infrastructure to move that water, combined with how we take care of that infrastructure, that enables us to provide this kind of documentation that allows you all and all of our state water contractors to do the planning that they need to do within their own resources management in their own service area. So our most recent State Water Project delivery capability report is starting to incorporate some of these changes in our patterns, going from a handful of extremely dry years. Our summary of that 2022-2023 winter season was moving from the 3 driest years on record to the 3 wettest weeks on record. It's hard to capture water in those circumstances. So we have to understand it better. We have to forecast it better, and make sure that when it does come, we're in a position to move it and store it, because we know that dry conditions return, and we know people rely on their groundwater basins during those dry conditions, which is very appropriate. But we need to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to actually replenish those supplies so that our whole surface water, groundwater system works together. What we're starting to learn is that over the next 20 years, California could lose about 10% of its water supply and delivery capability, potentially about 23% over time, not in the next 20 years, but over time, lose about 23% of our water reliability with the State Water Project as it is currently configured. And those are, I think, challenging figures. The 10% number is largely driven by the fact that our ambient temperatures are a little bit warmer. Our lows overnight aren't quite as low as they used to be. So we get these very dry conditions. All of our environment tends to be thirstier. So it absorbs more of that precipitation when we get it. It tends to evaporate more when we have these warmer conditions. And so that 10% reduction is less about actual less precipitation in California, and it's more about the fact that warmer temperatures actually create their own demand for water supply. And so that's what we're starting to track quite a bit more closely. And that also means that it almost sort of doubles down on the fact that when we do get these big rain events and warmer air tends to hold more moisture. So that's why we're getting more and more of these kind of superstorms coming in. How we are able to move that water and move that water efficiently is just key to California's water resilient future. We are working on multiple ways to protect the State Water Project. It's not just about Delta conveyance. This project is one that is a big project and will take many years to construct and be operational. So a lot of the questions and work that we're doing right now is, well, what are we doing in between that time? How do we make our project work better? So we're tracking a couple of key things. One is called forecast informed reservoir operations. And essentially what that means is for our State Water Project facilities, particularly in the far northern corner of the state, at Lake Oroville, we work off of hydrology and flood protection that is determined by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's very old. I think it was put together in the early 1970s. And so what we're doing with the Corps of Engineers is we're doing something called forecast informed reservoir operations, which allows us in California, which I think most of the country doesn't fully appreciate, is we have our long, dry summers. And so when we create flood space in our reservoirs during the winter, it's a very delicate balance. We don't want to release too much because we know we're relying on that supply into the summer. And so this idea of forecast informed reservoir operations is to bring a lot more of our technological advances in forecasting when we get these C-130s flying out over the Pacific Ocean and they're sort of measuring the intensity of an atmospheric river. We're starting to learn more about where they're actually going to make landfall, which really helps us at Oroville if we've got something coming in. And if it's going to come to the south, then we don't have to release as much water. We want to save it for water supply. So all those things are happening at the department. We're also working on protecting the water that moves through the Delta when we have these dry conditions, protecting it from salinity. So one of the things we're installing right now they're called operable gates in the Delta. So it had been, I was around in 2015, not in my current role, but during that drought, we ended up putting in rock barriers in the Delta. We hadn't done that since 1977. So we did it again in 2015, and then we actually did it again in 2021 and 2022. So that's an example of just the increasing occurrences of deeper dry conditions and how we make sure we're protecting the water supplies that currently move through the Delta in those instances from the San Francisco Bay that intrudes on that system. These operable gates will give us an opportunity to have to use less water in dry conditions to repel salinity. Right now, that's the only option available to us. use less water to repel that salinity into the ocean. So all of these things taken together need to happen. They're happening apace. We hope to get all of that online over the course of the next 2.5 to 3 years. And then also really operating as flexibly as we can. We just had a good series of storms in Northern California, and we were able to adjust our current permits to allow us to pump a little bit more water while we have these big storm systems coming through. We want to continue to do those kinds of things. We're working with the incoming federal administration to do those things as well together. There is a big interest in the federal administration and making sure that water is moving in the state, and we agree we need to move water in the state where it's going. So we think we're going to see a little bit more around that idea of really flexing our systems when it's wet, so that we can take advantage of these storms. All of that stuff is good stuff. Absolutely, we need it. But at the end of the day, when we look at what's happening over time with our hydrology and where we are with the State Water Project, we know that to really preserve the capability of the State Water Project, so to move us up from that maybe 23% loss over time to, we want to at least get half of that back. We want to preserve that. That's really out into the future. And that's why this project is the most important thing that we are doing to help enable the State Water Project to function more reliably, really for the next 100 years. And so we know, so we've been starting to track a little bit more about, when we get these big storm events, if we had 2 new intakes in the northern part of the Delta, how would that have improved our ability to move water during the storms? So this past, we had nice weather over the weekend, so it must have been in the middle of last week. That storm system, we could have moved about 75,000 acre feet more water. We had very limited demand for that water. If we had the conveyance facility in place, we would have already filled our share of San Luis Reservoir this year. And from this last 3 days worth of storms, that 75,000 acre feet would have been available for groundwater recharge to different parts of the state. And I say that as sort of an illustration of how all these pieces, even though, we look, especially in the context of our environmental documents, you look at a fairly narrow sort of independent utility of a particular project. But I think all of us know that our systems are integrated, and when we create flexibility in one part of the system, it enables flexibility downstream in other parts of the system. And that's definitely where we want to be as a state. A real, as diverse a water supply portfolio for our state water contractors, but there's no doubt that the State Water Project supplies are going to continue to be fundamental to how our system works. So a little bit more about this project. So as I mentioned, actually in 2024, which was a moderately kind of wet year, actually, no, it was quite wet. And we actually had significant challenges at our existing infrastructure in moving the water we needed to move. Last year was a pretty big year. We would have moved about 1 million acre feet of more water if we had the Delta conveyance in place. So just sort of back of the envelope math, that's about enough water for 10 million people for a year. So again, you get a real flavor of why the department is so focused on achieving this improvement to reliability. There are multiple reasons why our existing system doesn't work as we need it to. Some of it is, as I mentioned, related to changing hydrology. When our Delta system really rips, to use an informal word, we get 150,000 cubic feet per second, essentially going out to the ocean. There's no way we will ever build facilities to capture that much water. We don't have places to put it. My point is, it's a really big system. when the rains do come, that system really moves. What people I think don't fully appreciate is that when the California Bay Delta is getting very wet and moving a lot of water, it's operating at twice the size of the Colorado River. It's a big system. And so the hydrology affects it, regulatory requirements affect it, and protecting water quality in that central part of the Delta also affect it. So it's those three things coming together are the things that, you know, if you look in our delivery capability report, those are three things that really create this bottleneck in the Delta that prevent us from moving water. Another issue that is, I think, sort of harder sometimes for people to think. You don't really think about disaster until it happens, and I don't have to tell you all about that, especially here in LA County. It's just been a really rough start to 2025. But we do need this project to gird against an outage of our existing levee system in the Delta. Just this past summer, we experienced seepage on what we call a super levee in the Western Delta. And what that seepage is from is since 2005, there's been an increase that we're now starting to notice in terms of wear and tear on the levees, of increased tidal pressure that comes with sea level rise in combination with king tides. And so we do know our levee system is vulnerable. It's old. Even the ones that are well maintained are essentially built on peat soils, and an outage of that system would be catastrophic for California. It just would. We'd be out at a minimum 6 months, and at a more likely in the realm of a year to a year and a half, where we're not moving any water out of the State Water Project. So you get a real flavor of some of the limitations of our existing State Water Project system. I know you all know that those are things we've known about actually for a while, which is why in many ways figuring out what to do with Delta conveyance is something that has also been around the state for a while. We do believe we have the right sized project, and by that I mean all of our water contractors are investing in other things, and they all, some are looking at recycled water, some are really working on their groundwater basins. In some places we have desalination. We're going to have to do more of that in California. But what we wanted to do was make sure that we put the best project forward that could capture as much of these high water events as possible, but do it in a way that is as affordable as possible. I do want to acknowledge that there are rate pressures in California, and there are lots of decisions folks need to make about how to invest those dollars, be it property tax dollars or rate dollars. So we are working, and we think the size of the project that we have does the most for the least cost, if you will. It's the most cost-effective configuration that we've put together. Every local agency participating in the Delta Conveyance Project would use their portion of the Delta Conveyance water a little bit differently. I know for an agency like Avek, you have a dynamic situation with your groundwater basins, and folks really rely on groundwater pumping, particularly when deliveries from the State Water Project aren't there. So obviously this is a project that we believe works in concert with your local groundwater management and how you put together the totality of your deliveries. We are now really systematically working through all of the milestones with the projects. Just this week, we got another one of our permits, which is great, and we are now headed to the Water Board. The State Water Project has a right to this water already. What we're doing at the Water Board is seeking a permit to add these different points of diversion. And then the water board needs to make a decision about how we operate the project to make sure that we're not harming other legal water users. And again, this is all in the context of our existing water right. It's really about adding to our infrastructure to enable us to maximize that water right for all of our customers. So we do have an approved project and a final environmental impact report. As I mentioned, we do have our California Endangered Species Act permit as of this week. We moved to the water board, and then we are also working with what's called the Delta Stewardship Council, which recently made the decision. There had been some folks who were challenging our ability to do some important geotechnical work. They wanted the council to wait for the project to be done in total. We did not want to do that because it's that geotechnical work that is going to help us improve the project as we move through more of the planning and design phase. So that has also been decided by the Stewardship Council and decided in favor in a way that enables us to move the project forward. So the funding that we are requesting from Avek, your general manager, I think, explained it quite ably. But what's important here is we're moving through these permits, but what we need to be doing at the same time over the next 2 years is really additional engineering work to continue to improve the cost effectiveness of this project. As you may know, we have something called the Design Construction Authority. That is a joint powers authority of the state water contractors. So that was a really important aspect of this project that was designed to make sure that the contractors who are meant to pay for this project have the key governance function in ensuring that the project is designed appropriately and that cost control measures are deployed appropriately. And so all of that is working. And if you've not met the DCA General Manager, Graham Bradner, I'm sure he would be delighted to come down and get way into some serious engineering weeds and cost weeds on the project that I know are very, very important. But what we're looking at over the course of the next 2 years is to enable ourselves to get the design done so that when the projects are complete, we do not have a delay. When we come back to different boards and we present the final information on the yield of the project, the most up-to-date information on the cost of the project, the duration of the construction, and a financing plan. So you'll be able to see, who's contributing, how much. We want to make sure that everyone is confident that the benefits follow the investors. So we need to lay all of that out. And that's what we're anticipating doing in the next 2 years. What helps us with this funding is, as you know, delays really, really harm projects of this size. That's where you experience a lot of the cost increases. And so what's really important is when we have the permits and we lay out those plans and come back to all of our state water contractors to talk to them about, actually, participating in the construction of this project. That's the big dollars, that you have all the information that you need and planning for success. We don't have to then pause for a year or 2 years while we get our financing aligned. We're really ready to go. And then, as was explained earlier, if you choose to provide this additional increment in planning money, but then in 2027 decide, based on the additional information, this is a project that does not make sense for Avek, then that reimbursement will occur. And if you choose to be part of this project moving forward, then that reimbursement will also accrue to you, and your costs will be amortized over the duration of the construction period. If Avek does not decide to participate in this project ultimately, what it really means is we will, because not all state water contractors south of the Delta are participating in this project. But it does mean that, you know, your supplies will be focused on what we can deliver out of the South Delta. This diversion is additive. So, but we do anticipate over time deliveries out of the South Delta to just decline. For lots of the reasons I've already stated, more potential interruption when we have drought conditions, more potential interruption if we have a seismic event or a levee failure, which can occur in the context of very intense storms that occur in Northern California. But that will be your piece of the State Water Project supply. I would say it is, you know, if something happened in the South Delta and there was an outage, you could potentially, you know, work with your sister state water contractor agencies and try and arrange a degree of transfer. But, you know, my word of caution would be if that's happening, then all the state water contractors are leaning exclusively on the Delta Conveyance Project for their state water project supplies. So I think that has a degree of unreliability to it because you're really kind of focused on, you know, who's going to want to be selling water in that kind of condition. And I think you could reasonably expect prices would rise with that potential scarcity. I would say maybe in closing, and then I really do want to get to your questions. And if there's questions from your public commenters, I'd be glad to stay and answer them. But I want to recognize that every state water contractor is in a different position relative to supply and demand, relative to other alternative supplies. So this is really a decision for you all to make based on your values here in the Antelope Valley. One of the things that I think is valuable about this project is that ultimately, and part of the conversation that we'll be having with you all and our other state water contractors is how to make the water transfer market work better, so that folks who are investing in this project, if they don't have an immediate need for the water, there's more flexibility in our water transfer market so that you can use this water as a revenue generator. It's really important in some of our urban areas, Metropolitan and Santa Clara, that we create, we've started to create that transfer market in something called the water management tools, which allow state water contractors to work with one another on long duration transfers. But we need to open that, I think, even wider. That has been part of our governor's water agenda, is to, particularly with the Central Valley Project, is to create conditions where we can have a joint place of use so that there are more parties to trade water with. We think the market is in a certain kind of controlled way has a real valuable efficiency in how it allocates water. So for awareness, you know, for agencies such as yours that may not feel the immediate need, I would say kind of 2 points. One is this water would be able to be transferred in a broader market. And two, this is fundamentally about a project, you know, not for the next 20 years. This is about a project for your communities, you know, in the next 50 years and beyond. So I just thank you for your interest. I want to thank you for your vision and leadership. It is your vision and leadership that kind of put you in this position where maybe is enviable from other state water contractors who are you know, intensely focused on this, but it really is your vision and leadership that have gotten you here, and I'd be just delighted to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
We thank you, and we'll defer to the board for any questions. Then anybody in the audience will defer to that, and we'll come back to the board for the final questions. So is there anybody from the board who has questions would like to address the speaker?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so how do we capture some more of that water when it really rips?
this kind of project, but also adaptive management around our existing project. But at the end of the day, this adds 6,000 cubic feet per second of capacity to the State Water project. We're not going to get 6,000 cubic feet per second around adaptive management around existing infrastructure in the South Delta.
Okay, no, but I know Director Parrish, Director Donato.
Director, I got a couple of questions. Now, this water eventually will be served to approximately 30 million people. Basically, it's involved in this project, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I want to get my facts correct. You know, I think there's a way to do this. I think it's better, this will be shared among the 30 million people and their prospective areas across the board. That way it brings the costs to agencies like our size and other agencies that are smaller, because it's going to benefit them. That's number one. Number two is that we have a taxing mechanism, property tax mechanism. If that happens, then state legislators can allow us to use our property taxes to pay back the bond that's been issued for this project instead of our general fund. And that's something I just want to bring up. I don't think anybody on this board is against getting more water. I mean, I don't think that's it.
I understand.
I think the other thing too is I'm looking at, is this a 36-inch pipeline or is that just a,
36 foot.
okay, how big is the pipeline?
It's a tunnel and pipeline. It's 36 feet in diameter.
Is that gonna be big enough? I'm,
Yeah, it's designed to carry, as Carla mentioned, 6,000 cubic feet per
Okay.
second.
well, I know, but they're talking 50 to 100 years from now, you know, that's why I'm bringing it up. Because, you know, I think that needs to really be explored because I've been involved with this project back when it was the Twin Tunnels. Dan Flory was our manager at the time. Went to all the different conferences to hear this thing. It started off, our cost was $6 million, you know, and we know it's gonna be more, you know, we know it's gonna be more. The question is if we can get it somehow as a bonding mechanism that would work for, you know, 30 million people, be spread across, I think that would be more affordable. And I think you have more agreeable people that would contribute to this.
Yeah, so that I'm glad you mentioned that because that is one of the things we're looking at over the course of the next 2 years. So we started with a project that was specific to the State Water project and our existing set of contractors. And when I take the Department of Water Resources does more than own and operate the State Water project. We do a lot of water planning and financial and groundwater, lots of stuff. And when I take off my State Water project hat and I take a step back and I said, does California need this project and this water? The answer is unequivocally yes. And so what we want to do over the course of the next 2 years, making sure we're working with our contractors, because some of our contractors get anxious when we sort of expand the number of beneficiaries of the project, as you point out. But that is something we will do. And when I mentioned we would be coming back with a financial plan, that's the place where you all would understand if we've added beneficiaries to this project and how we're sharing the costs across everybody.
Yeah,
So
the other comment you made, a very interesting comment regarding that the erosion and the Delta area and other areas, in case there's a catastrophe of some sort, somehow maybe we can incorporate building a larger water bank here in the Antelope Valley to put some of this water in it that you can't get down from there, that we could take it from here to put it in the aqueduct. And because the biggest user on us is gonna be Matt. I mean, we all know that. So I think we need to look at that as well, because we have a lot of vast land in this area that can handle that, and we've done millions of dollars worth of studies too. So we have a lot of that groundwork already done. But that's something I would suggest. This is my comment.
good, thank you.
Director Parrish.
Yes, I have a few comments and honored to have you here, Director. We have a lot of work to do, so we appreciate the presentation. You covered one of my main questions, kind of. I just want to make sure that if we lose our ability to pump in the South Delta completely, which nobody wants to believe could happen, but it could happen with what's happening now with a catastrophic earthquake, with climate change, with sea level rise, all those things could do that. If we lost that and we did not participate in the Delta Conveyance Project, it sounds like we're going to be at the mercy of those who did participate. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so that facility would be non-functioning, the tunnel would be functioning, and it would be up to all those individual contractors that did invest. If they have, water to sell to Avek in that, in that moment, that's how you would secure that state water project supply.
So all of our imported water into the valley would then be, Palmdale would have imported water because apparently they're going to participate in this 2 times more than what they have now. So they've made that decision. A Little Rock would have water, but Avek would have no water. Is that right?
Right, if we had that kind of outage.
Okay.
I mean, the first thing we would be doing for the state water project is getting something operational to move health and safety water,
Sure.
right? So that would be happening, but that's a very modest amount of water that's really targeted for indoor and sanitation use.
No, exactly. I mean, it'd be a catastrophic event. The other, I think this decision for us, I would classify as a no-brainer. It's investing money now to have you continue the planning, engineering, looking at all the financing. And if we decide in 2027 not to participate, then we get that money back, right?
Yeah.
So it seems that, I see the need for this project. I actually see it as the same type of decision that our George's probably father or grandfather made when they decided to vote and participate in the state water project. It's that type of decision for us, I believe. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a generational decision, to be sure. Yeah.
And it may not impact us personally, but it's going to impact our communities for the next forever if we make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we really appreciate you coming tonight, and personally, I'm going to vote for this. We're not voting tonight, but I think all of our directors should really consider a yes vote on this part, and maybe announce tonight how you're leaning so that.
Rob, no campaigning.
I'm not campaigning, George.
Okay,
Thank you, though.
okay. Is there any other
I got
comments?
one question. So in your presentation here that I have, it says including nearly 7 million disadvantaged community members. What does that mean?
So that means folks who are living below a particular income level. So, the communities served by the State Water Project, California has a lot of folks that are living in low income communities. And this project is important because in light of other alternatives, things like recycled water or desalination, certainly stormwater capture, all these things are more expensive than shoring up this system, and part of why the State Water Project has been effective over these many decades at providing affordable, reliable water is economies of scale. And so a lot of those communities, this is their entree into an economy of scale for water that other alternatives don't provide. So that's why that's important.
And that's why that 30 million bond I'm talking about would help those 7 million people get water, and it'd be spread out across the entire, pretty much Southern California.
Okay, okay. Drew, did you have a question?
Yeah, well,
Comment?
kind of wanted to follow up on a couple of things that Director Donato and Director Perry said. I definitely think the cost needs to be spread out more, because exactly as Director Donato said, it benefits far more people than just the state water contract, really statewide, because it's taking the burden off of even the 10 million remaining downfalls. So I think moving forward over the next few years before a final decision is made, really want to see thinking outside the box in terms of getting additional support. The statewide voters have passed several water bonds already, thinking projects like this were going to get funded, and so I'd like to see more of that rather than just on the backs of us, because as we see with a lot of large state projects, as you said, delays and everything else that add to it. And the presentation we had, it was a 2-to-1 cost benefit ratio, which is great if that cost stays the same.
Right.
But we see that doesn't always happen. And so I think spreading that out would help guarantee for our customers that it remains a good deal. The other side, and I'm glad you mentioned working with the federal government, because we do have a new administration that cares about agriculture in the Central Valley and serving the residents. And, elections, when they're over, we need to sit down and work together.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased to see the governor, taking a few steps towards that, because we need to work together. And I think if we were to leave federal funds on the table, it'd be a real disservice.
Right. Agree 100%. I have a request of you. So if you all are interested in broader state support for this project or funding for this project, talking about it to your legislators is really important. They are the key to that. I think our governor has made a run at trying to get some of the regulations streamlined around this project, certain things like limiting the statute of limitations on litigation over CEQA, which we know, I think there's a growing awareness that it holds as that law, passed in the 70s and signed by, I think, Governor Reagan, doesn't do the things we need it to do. It's sort of, it's now kind of preventing good things from happening. And so our governor has made a few attempts to figure out how we can reduce litigation on big projects such as this one. And so far the legislature has not been open to that. And so if you all are interested in those kinds of things or interested in this project, that is a really important message for you to take to Sacramento.
So are you saying that if this board and management can give our local legislators and tell them in an urgency letter to you, the director, that we would like this, we're interested in this project, but we want the cost to be spread over the 30 million people instead of just us, being one of the 28
Contractors.
holding the bag. And I think that's possible. I think it's feasible. I think we can, I support something like that. What do you think?
Yep.
Okay.
I think Gary had something on.
I have one more question. Do we see some federal funds coming our way to help with this?
I hope so. I hope so. It's hard for me to read the tea leaves of what's happening with federal funding. I think right now our state focus is to make sure that the financial contributions from the federal government to sites reservoirs so that we can potentially access federal dollars. So that's definitely part of the message we're carrying back to Washington, D.C.
Director Miller?
Yes, thank you for being here. One of the concerns I really have is, you mentioned with the state water project that the availability of transporting water decreases without this project. How does it decrease? Is it the subsidence that's taking place, or how, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so subsidence is a factor. So you all may know that when the California Aqueduct was designed, we designed for a certain amount of natural subsidence, making sure we had enough sort of freeboard in the canal so that we could move it at high flows. In many cases, due to groundwater pumping along the canal, we have some spots where it's really sunk, and it would not be safe to just run it at high flows. And that's a constraint we have. So we are looking into ways to remediate that. Those are ways we definitely want some help from the federal government, also state government. And then, I know groundwater management has been a very painful subject in the Central Valley, but making sure that if we're putting tax dollars into subsidence, it's not, we're not putting good taxpayer money after bad, then the problem continues to persist. So it is the moment. I think the moment is financial plan to deal with the subsided aqueduct. That's one piece of the puzzle, but we think that's a fixable problem. What is not a fixable problem is the way in which we're going to see these storm events, and so this year and last year was a really, really good example of frustrating wet conditions. So we had a really decent spring, not as fantastic as 2023, but decent enough. And we had a lot of salmon and steelhead trout moving through the system. And because of where the pumps are, whenever we turn them on, if it's during their migration season, we start to catch them at the pumps. And that's, unless we want to change state and federal law too, there's not a lot that we can do about that because you can't catch those threatened and endangered fish. So what we end up doing is we end up pulling them out and putting them into a truck, and we truck them around and dump them in a different part of the Delta. And predators are smart, they evolve, they know we dump them there. So you kind of can't think of a worse way to, manage what is a very specific conflict around how we move water, and what salmon need to do in our system as they're, getting out to the ocean. So that's not going to change. This is structurally just very different. We've had, when we have water that's coming into our pumps, so we turn on the pumps, and I know I don't have to tell you this, but maybe for folks who aren't quite as familiar, but we have our east-west tidal estuary, and we put the pumps down at the bottom of that estuary. So we turn it on, and a tidal system, and over millennia, salmon migrate at east-west and up into their natal habitat. As soon as we turn that on, we change the direction of the water. And so we regulate ourselves around how much can we change that direction of the water? Because at some point, there's a tipping point that the fish can't swim against that changed direction. That pulls them into the pumps. We've known about this problem since the State Water Project was first constructed. There's lots and lots of paperwork that says, this is going to be a problem for fish. And now that those species are struggling, it's an increasing problem for water supply. So what we're doing with this is putting 2 new intakes along the Sacramento River, and it's a much more passive system. So when the river gets really full, when it's ripping, we turn that on, but the water is still moving parallel to the intakes, not perpendicular into the intakes. And that's the fundamental physical difference that will provide the water user community relief from this excruciating dynamic that sometimes when it rains, fish start to migrate, and at exactly the moment we need to be turning on our systems, we can't turn them on all the way. This gives us that new valve that enables things to turn on all the way. Again, in the context of our existing water right. So we're sort of underusing the water right that we already have.
Yeah, so that brings up the question, does that resolve the problem at the pumps by having the Delta Conveyance Project and functioning? Or are we still going to have that challenge with?
We'll always have that challenge down there. Okay. We just will, but this will provide a different way. So again, if Avek chooses not to invest, that's obviously the choice for your community, but it does mean you will still have, instances, not all the time, but instances when it's wet, and that wet signal is the signal to salmon to start migrating through this estuary, and we'll turn on the pumps a little bit, but not as much as we need to. And when you think about it in the context of filling groundwater basins that are overtaxed because we've come out of dry conditions, I would say, the thing that keeps me up at night the most about the vulnerabilities in the Delta, because we've known since 2005 after Katrina, and the Corps did their survey of the entire country. They honed in on the Delta and said, this is extremely vulnerable, this levee system, and it can't be fixed by just building bigger and bigger levees. My worst case scenario is the state of California we have a brutal drought like we had in basically started really in 2020 and then got really lousy in 2021 and 2022. All of our systems, people were really draining their reservoirs, and we're trying to kind of hold this thing together. A couple of years of single digit allocations gets really rough across the board. Then we had this big set of storms that came in the winter of 2023. That storm door opened. Initially, we were tracking it to go a little farther north. So in through the Golden Gate, and what happens climate-wise, it comes in through the Golden Gate and kind of spins up into the Sacramento Valley, which we like as a water supplier, because then we know it's going to hit Oroville and hit those northern Sierra, which is a big part of where our water rights originate. I'm a little bit grateful that it didn't do that, because there's a huge liability when we have these big storms that are coming in and then starting to push huge amounts of water down through the Delta. That's the other kind of catastrophic scenario. It's not so much a poorly timed earthquake, which wouldn't be good in any time, but it's a huge storm event that breaks a really long drought but also breaks a levee, and then suddenly it's raining in California. It's a palpable sense of relief. All of our customers expect us to use our infrastructure to refill the storage. We can't, because all that water is spoiled by seawater and we are shut down. That is the worst case scenario. And I'm kind of, as part of my job to think through the worst case scenario, like what would be really bad? Why do we get up and work so hard? That's a negative situation. And it is not implausible, not by a long shot, not looking at these past 5-10 years and how our system is behaving in these really, big atmospheric river fives coming through, lots of wind, lots of destruction. And that's going to be more of the norm.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Paris,
Actually, I might reserve comments till after we hear the speakers, but I do want the director to know this is probably the largest crowd we've ever had at AVEC. And they've come to listen to you and hear your responses and for you to hear them. And we're also honored to have almost the entire city council from Lancaster. Really appreciate you coming. Mayor Rex Paris, back in the back, Vice Mayor Marvin Chris, Councilman Ken Mann, and Councilwoman Lauren Leslie Hughes. Or Lauren Hughes Leslie. I always forget that. I'm sorry, Lauren. But thank you very much for coming, and I think we look forward to what.
Okay,
everyone's
Dr.
done.
Paris,
A follow-up, because I used to work in the legislature, so I know how important that is, your recommendations. Director Miller and I are going to be in Washington, D.C. for the Aqua Conference in a couple of weeks, and we're setting up meetings with our federal representatives. So if there's any details on lots of money, funding sources that you're looking at the federal level, please send it to us, because happy to share that when we're out there.
Thank you. That'd be great. Will do.
Yeah. I had a couple of comments I'd like to ask. One is Proposition 13 that passed by a large majority, and that's protect boards from doing bond issues that might affect the taxpayers for years to come. And I'm not sure legally if we're required to do that under the state guidelines, and that Bridgeport Act of 1959, they left it pretty open what could be done and how the state can charge. But if we're not legally, we need to be morally. We do not want to encumber the taxpayers for decades to come with almost $2 billion time you do principal and interest right there. So that's a concern. Do you know what other boards are doing? The state water contractors, are you aware of they passed them with other board, or are they doing a public vote?
No public votes. I think Metropolitan, which is of course the biggest, and of course they have not, I think the real, the real conversation comes when it's about larger sums of money and actual construction, because that's when you need to, do that kind of bonding. And so I know Metropolitan, in terms of its property taxes as a special district, was able, just with a vote of their board, to increase their property taxes that support, Metropolitan's revenue streams. So I think, Chair Lane, it's different across the board, but we haven't had a water agency that has needed a public vote to generate their revenue.
And is Bakersfield, have they voted one way or another? From the water agency?
Not yet, probably in March.
No. Our district, we have 3 counties, Ventura, LA, and Kern County. And from one end of the district to the next, you're driving with over 2,000 square miles. It would almost take you 2 hours to drive it from Gorman, Fraser Mountain Park to Boron. But we're concerned about the property tax. Very small percentage of our district, they receive any benefit from the water, but yet they're paying for it. You have the cities, they receive by far the benefit. But in this type of scenario, the taxpayers would be subsidizing, the water users. And when I first came on the board, which has been a number of years ago, we sold about half the water now than we did in the late 70s, early 80s, right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a concern. And if you drive around Lancaster, I know you haven't had the opportunity, but so many yards are being let go and dried up. People just cannot afford the water.
Mm-hmm.
And some of our customers, Roseman, they use almost no water. Mojave uses they use a little bit of water, almost no water. California City, they use, no water. So we're losing customers and not, gaining them. And we have options, your presentation certainly was a viable, one of the options that's available, but our groundwater, we have about 80,000 square feet after adjudication, and maybe 20, 30,000 of that is spoken. So we have about 50,000 square feet, acre feet of water available. And if you use the numbers that were presented by the state some time ago, they said about a quarter of an acre foot per family. I don't quite believe that unless you shower with your neighbor. But anyway, that even if it's a half an acre foot, usage, that would provide up to 100,000 new homes being built in the Antelope Valley. And what about that is this could be built when it's needed, maybe decades before it's needed. And if we do the system that you're speaking about, it's going to be fairly immediately where the taxpayers are going to have to start picking that up. And the other system, it's going to be, whoever needs the water, they'll be paying the water, and hopefully it wouldn't go on the tax bill. And so I would hope the board would consider that. We do have water available. And originally, before adjudication, we were pumping much more than 80,000 square feet. That's what our safe yield. So if something happened, it was something went out in the levee or delta, if we had to pump, more than 80,000 square feet, acre feet, we could do it, but we'd have to pay the return rate right there. So we're not going to be without. We have a vast underground reservoir, and so we 2,100 square miles. Most of it has a water basin to it.
Mm-hmm.
And another question about the planning. We've already spent 13 million, and you need another 11, approximately a million, and that seems pretty inefficient. You would spend that much money. That's just 3.8% on our behalf. And you would still need, more money in the planning. It would take that. Approximately what percentage are you looking at for planning for this project or total cost? Do you have any estimate on that?
Oh, the overall
Upfront money?
I don't off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that for you. I'll look at my notes when I sit down, and maybe I can provide that response after you have your public comments. That's a good question.
But does it not seem excessive to you that or 3% over 25 million, and that hasn't, or over 13 million, and that hasn't provided the information the state needs yet?
I think that no, because I think that it's a complex project, and one of the things that we've done the key feature of this adjusted version of the project has been moving the alignment out of the central part of the delta, which I think initially was something that folks were focused on because, the shortest way from point A to point B is a straight line. But some additional initial engineering work got us to a place where we now actually have a longer tunnel, but it is closer to Interstate 5 up there in Northern California. And that provides a lot more cost savings when we think about the constructability of the tunnel. So there's certain pieces of it. I think that it was just really through better exploration. That's why the geotechnical work has been very important to understand the soils down there and to understand the strength of the levees in the interior part of the delta. There's roads on top of levees, and the idea of, the constructability when you have, big tunnel boring machines and you're getting all that stuff set up. What we sorted out was actually, in terms of cost benefit, the longer tunnel on a different route was probably more cost effective than continuing to try and move through the tunnel. So that's just things you need to know through the course of getting it. You can look at it on a map, but you got to get out in the field and do some of the work.
Thank you. I'm just hoping
Yeah.
we're gonna have a public session and review this, and hopefully we'll get public input. But I would hope the board wouldn't try to make a decision at this point, which appears one maybe wants to, but we need to look at all the facts and listen to the residents and look at the cost benefit ratio, look at alternatives. And I think that's important. And in regarding the proposition 13, the vote, that's just critical that a board would want to encumber taxpayers for decades to come without public support.
Mhm.
That's why Proposition 13 passed. Thank you. Is there anything, and we're going to go to the audience now, so our board secretary will call a name and everybody's welcome to speak. And just maybe try not to repeat what another said, but you feel free to speak.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for coming down. Madam Secretary?
Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Eddie Escoto Alvarez. I'm a member of the council and a member and council representative for the LA and Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. We represent over 160,000 construction workers, union construction workers in the region. I like to say that we represent all the construction workers represented and non-represented throughout California. We're here today, obviously, for the Delta Conveyance Project, supporting that you yes vote eventually on this. Beyond the jobs that this is going to create for this project, this is also going to create a lot of jobs in the future of what we've done here in the Antelope Valley with our great community workforce agreements, and really and building up a lot of careers that you see. A lot of the brothers behind me, sisters behind me, are direct benefactors of our strong community workforce agreements that we have throughout the region. And this project, and voting yes on this project, will make sure that we're able to do that by building out future developments, may it be commercial, may it be residential, things that we work on throughout the whole entire year and for years and years to come. One of the things that we're looking at projects like this, what really brings us together is something hard to do. In the room, you have local government, business, and labor unions all kind of rowing in the same direction. And let me tell you, someone who does this for a living, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's actually pretty hard, but up here we found a way to get that done, and we're very proud of that. And we're hoping that you see it in the future to also get this done, because like I said, this is not just for the jobs of the conveyance project. This is going to be a lot of jobs for us, the conveyance project, but also for the jobs of the future of Antelope Valley. We are very, very invested in this community with hydrogen, the high-speed rail, and all the commercials that have been going on. I can go on and on of all the projects. We are very proudly union built in this town, and we will continue to invest into this community. And this investment into water is, in my opinion, the most single important thing that we can do to invest not just for building, but jobs of our members and their well-being of the members that we have living in this community, which is very, very large now, thanks to the work that we've done up here. So again, this will put not just your constituents to work, not just from this project, from future projects that will be built by our membership and your constituents. Thank you very much.
And thank you, and good precise presentation. And let me assure you, we will have the water, just no matter what method, but the water will be available. Okay, Madam Secretary.
Kathy McLaren,
Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. I feel like can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm glad I came tonight. I've heard this presentation numerous times and there's always something to learn. But I do want you to know that, and I feel like I'm talking to friends and partners here because we are all partners. We're all together in our state water contractors and in our adjudicated basin. And we already know that we have a lot invested in our whole community and everything revolves around that. So for our board, we did choose to do this. And the reason I say we chose to do it because they're giving us a great opportunity to look at this, put in the money now for this, look at it. Great ideas that she said, which we'll be doing, I'm sure, with AV Edge and other things, talking to any legislator that we can. And at the same time, some of what you guys are saying is you want other options. In that 2 years, we should all band together and look at those other options, but really be open to putting out the money, knowing even if you choose in 2027 not to do that, that you looked at every possible solution. And I know that that's something that we're good at. We work hard here because we always have to pull together for ourselves. Everyone in the Antelope Valley knows it takes us to work with our cities and everything for what we get because we don't always get a fair share. So we always have to make a little bit extra effort to work together. So I'm imploring you as one of the partners with you guys to please look at it as you're putting out the money, but you can get it back. And then let's hear all those different ideas, work together with legislators, get our cities and our community on board, and think of all the ideas we can, because I know we're good at brainstorming and coming up with ideas and following through with them. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Madam Secretary.
Johnny Escobedo,
Good evening, board members.
Yeah, welcome.
My name is Johnny Escobedo. I'm a business agent for Iron Workers Local 416. I've been working in this community since 1998 when I first did the retrofit for the Women's Center at the hospital. We have an abundance of members that work up here. They participated in your community and reinvested in it. By agreeing to this project, you're allowing us to bring the trades to the younger generations. Our younger generations have lost the ability to learn how to read a ruler. I tell educators, we need to take cell phones, laptops away from them. We need to give them that little 12-inch stick of wood that's got all those little lines on it and get them intrigued with that. You know, we are the ones that need to push that forward. And with your guys' help and agreeing to this project, I think that we will be able to accomplish that and get some of the younger generations to learn that these right here is a good way to earn a living, not just this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you much.
James Mendenhall,
Good evening. My name name is James Mendenhall. I'm a 25-year member of the Operating Engineers, Local 12. I'm here to express my support, along with the rest of my brothers in the local for this project and anything like this. After enjoying the presentation from earlier, I believe that this is going to be very important for our state going forward, protect our water and our way of life. Since this project is going to be done under a project labor agreement or a community workforce agreement, it's going to be done with skilled labor. Apprentices are going to be on these projects. We've got over 750 apprentices in our trade that we're training these guys, and we need on the job experience. These kind of projects provide that. So, we're supporting this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Renee Palacios.
Good evening. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Renee Palacios. This March, I'll be a member of the Ironworkers Local 433 for 36 years. I'm currently serving as the business agent and representative for all the ironworkers in this Antelope Valley. We strongly urge you to approve the Delta Convenience Project. Because of the Community Workforce Agreement, this project will be built by local residents, veterans, apprentices, and folks who may need a second shot at life, who are starting their careers in the building trades. Our apprentices are currently training. Right now, I found out this morning that we have at least 1,200 apprentices in the ironworkers right now, currently with 433 and 416. Our main job is to teach the future construction worker, and this project will help us do that with your constituents who will build out these major projects. This project will improve water reliability and support California's housing goals. Its positions in this area as a leader in development, bringing long-term benefits to the region. This project is a game changer, not just for our members, but for the residents of this region. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary.
Traceless Nebla.
Welcome.
Good evening, board president and board, and thanks for letting me speak tonight. So my name is Trolis Niebla, city manager, city of Lancaster, and this presentation here really pulled at my heartstrings. So I'm also a registered professional engineer in the state of California. So hearing all of this engineering stuff, and I heard the word geotechnical out of the director's presentation, and I loved it. But I wanted to get into a little discussion about partnership and future sustainability. I think that's really what we've all been focusing on as a region. It's evident in the stuff that we've done here. We're the first net zero city that took partnership vision. We have the first all electric bus fleet vision partnerships. Same with now we're moving forward with hydrogen and really trying to take ourselves off the grid so we're independent from Edison. But all these partnerships and sustainability projects, that applies to water as well. If you look at what this board has accomplished and Avek has accomplished, you guys are building out your infrastructure systems. You've got water banking on both the east and west side of town. You're ensuring that we're managing our water well. As the director indicated, we don't know what the rainstorms are going to hold for us. So when we get it, we got to be able to store it so we can pump it. So Avek's done a tremendous job at that. Palmdale, Palmdale Water District has a recycled water project they're working on. I also heard earlier they're participating in this project. So again, forward thinking, looking at resilience. The city of Lancaster, we're in the process of not only partnering with all of these agencies, but we're also trying to build out our own recycled water system on the north side of town so that all that new 7.5, 10 million square foot of industrial is able to utilize recycled water to irrigate and to provide fire flow so that they're not taking up the potable water demand. The Water Master's done a good job at managing the groundwater system and making sure that we're not overdrawing that and making sure it's a viable source in the future. Again, partnerships, sustainability, but this only ensures about a 15 to 20 year water supply. So really a project like this that the director was talking about, where we're looking at the next 50 100 years so that our kids, grandkids can keep turning the tap on and having water there, it's important. So I would urge this board to support this project. I know the city of Lancaster supports this project. We're looking forward to being at these meetings in the next 2 years and partnering somehow, some way. That's more up to the council and how that works, but we're just eager to see this, so we support this project. Thank you.
And Shirley, it's just a reminder, we have enough water for decades to come. And as far as the water supply, we all agree upon that. And the cities will have enough water supply, but we're looking at the most efficient one. Right now, we're focused on the most expensive one with the state, the 15 to 16,000 square feet plus or minus. We probably got 50 to 60,000 square feet available on the groundwater. So it's just, would you not want to see the most efficient, cost-effective one versus so far everybody's been saying the state, but there's alternatives right there.
Mr. President?
Well, I'm still talking to Jalees.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts on that.
I'd have to look into it to see what the most
That's
efficient and
what
effective
our
is.
board needs to do, is look at the most cost-effective. Yeah, it should occur.
You told me not to politics, so I'm just passing on to you, but there is a different opinion on this board, Mr. President, about what our future water supplies are, what's happening with our basin, how much water will be available. As you know, I have served as the Water Master Chairman for this board and for the Water Master for the last several years. And, you know, we're doing a water model right now, and the figures you're giving, they might be right. I don't think so. And I think we wait till the water model comes out, and I think we see what our Water Master engineer has to say. But before you put somebody like our city manager from Lancaster on the spot like that, let's wait until we have that information. And this gives us the ability to do that.
I agree with
In
you.
2 years, we'll have that information.
Oh, 2 years, better be faster than that.
Well,
Okay.
no, I mean, while we're
Okay.
studying this
Yeah.
more and looking at it, but if you try to kill our involvement now, that would be very short-sighted. Let us see what the next 2 years brings.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
The next speaker?
Mayor Rex Harris, Lancaster.
In welcome.
Mr. Wood, thank you. Whether or not we have enough water is built around the projections of what the historical growth has been and what that means in the future. And I would suggest that nobody on this board has any idea what's coming. And what you're doing now, if you close these doors for us, you limit our options of what kind of industry we can bring in, what kind of future we can have based upon historic projections. And I'm here to tell you that historical projection is wrong. It's just wrong. You are going to see such dynamic growth in the next 10 years, the next 20 years, that is going to be simply mind-boggling. And all we're asking here is preserve the option. Preserve the option. Don't use water as a means to stop growth, because that's what has happened in more communities than I could count. It's the inability to see that we've never seen before what's coming. All we're saying here is give us the option. And if this board can't afford to do it, the city will front the money. It will cost you nothing if you do not have the money to do it now. This is your purview. It is not your purview to close doors. And that's what I hear coming from you, is you want to close doors. We're talking about a guarantee of getting the money back if you decide not to proceed with it. We'll lend it to you. We'll front it. We'll pay it. Just don't close the doors on us. And that would be inexcusable. Thank you.
Thank you. Rex, everybody's been positive about we'll have the water, and within probably a year or 2 years, we have the water basin. We can have water available much faster for the city of Lancaster and the Antelope Valley than they can with the state. And we're sitting on a tremendous water basin. In many communities in California don't have a water basin. We do have a water basin.
Mr. Lane, a month ago, the people of Los Angeles thought they had enough water also. And we saw what happened. You have to plan. You can't just assume everything's going to happen the way you hope it will. Palmdale has just notified us they will share that cost with us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. Is there
No more speaker cards. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Okay, we thank everybody, much. Very good presentation, very good comments.
There might be some comments online.
Okay. And for the people, member of the union, I'd like to say I've been a member of the union for 35 years.
George?
Yes. John?
Yeah.
Hey, John, nice to hear from you.
John, you said, I think it was very nice of Mr. Paris to say that City Lancaster will pick up the tab on this. It's a nice offer. I agree with you, George, and I've been in all the groundwater studies since the late 80s, okay? Involved with all the experts, going up all the way back to some of the experts at City Lancaster. I feel that we have adequate water. As far as the growth in this valley, 45 years ago, they were saying that we was going to have 600, 700,000 people living up here in this valley. That didn't happen. Okay, we're going to have growth, but I think we have enough water to take care of the future growth. We get into what's happened down at the Palisades. I go back there too, because I was raised down in that area. Okay, the reason they didn't have water was because of the poor planning on the pipelines, the size of the pipelines that were put in that area. So George, anyway, I would like you to know that what decision you make, I will be behind you 100%. Thank you, George.
John, I appreciate those comments. You always have very good comments. Is there anyone else online? Okay, we've had a good hearing and good comments, and there's nothing further. We'll take a 5-minute break and we come back to the rest of the meeting. But thank you everyone for attending. It was very positive. All of you did a very good job.
No. Okay. That was very interesting. Okay, let's start with item 8B1, consider possible action to accept and file the revenue and expense report for second quarter of fiscal year 24-25, and our general manager, Matt's going to give us an overview.
All right. Thank you, Director Donato. So in your packet on page 16 is a copy of the quarterly revenue and expense report for the first 6 months of the current fiscal year. So this covers the period of July 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. And we look at this at halfway through the year just to see how we're tracking of actual revenue and expenses versus what we budgeted for the current fiscal year. So go through this, hit the highlights on this. We went through it in pretty detail with the finance committee last week. So first section, we have operating revenue. Big category there is water sales, water that we we sell to each of our customers. Most of that goes to our big retail customers like LA County Waterworks and Quartz Hill Water District. So year to date, that's that first 6-month period. We've generated about $20.2 million through water sales. We budgeted just under $31.5 million for the entire year. We're about 64% of the budget amount, and that's due to the heavier demand periods during that first 6 months. So that's like July, August, September are our big demand months. So we'll probably see that percentage get closer to 100 by the end of the year. Let's see, other category is water transfers. Even though we're only at 6% of the budget, that $197,000 is from a lease we have with LA County Waterworks, where they lease our groundwater, a portion of our groundwater production rights. The remaining roughly $3 million that we project to receive in the second 6-month period is due to the lease agreement we have with San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency. So I believe we've already received that in January. So the total 59% of our budget we've received in revenue. Operating expenses down below the expense side. So big category there is water purchases. This is a cost associated with moving water through the state water project. So most of this went to DWR for physically moving water through the project. It's at 35% budget. We budgeted a little bit more in the event we needed to do some banking of that water. So we're a little bit under where the 50% mark is, but still doing pretty good. See, another big expense item, fees and services. That covers all of our legal, our property insurance, liability insurance for the agency. What else is in that? Those are big items. Personnel expenses is all inclusive of salaries, benefits, retirement, etc. So we're right at 52%. Depreciation in our budget, we assume $8.6 million in depreciation of our assets. So we're right, we assume exactly 50% for the first 6 months. And overall, you can see we're at 47% of the budget for expenses, slightly under the 50% target. So we're doing really good there. And any questions on the operating expenses and revenue before we move on to non-operating? Hearing none?
Just one quick question.
Yes.
Are we looking at fiscal year or?
Yeah, fiscal year. So what you're seeing year to date is July 1 through December 31st.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Our non-operating revenues, a majority of this is our property tax, both our state water project voted indebtedness or state water project tax that we put on all the property throughout the agency. And it also includes our portion of the 1% ad valorem tax. You can ask.
This question, it's a 4,400. Just for the board, because that presentation was long, the property taxes are only used to pay out the bond, correct?
The state water project cost.
Right. So if the board participates and they get the 30 million spread across, let's say, the cost, our share, we could pay our portion of that to that because that's part of the state water contract.
Correct. That's the opinion of.
So I just want to let you know, that's the angle we need to go after.
Yeah.
You guys need to go after. Yeah. I'm going to be gone in about less than 30 days, but you need to go after the 30 million, and you need to go after to make sure legislators incorporate that you can pay the property taxes. That way you'll keep the taxes from going up.
Yeah. And just give you a breakdown, for the first 6-month period, about 21 million of that 25 million is collected for the state water project. About 4.5 million is collected under the 1%, our portion of the 1% ad valorem tax. So that 4.2 million can be used for operating expenses for the agency. The state water project tax is dedicated to repayment of the state water project. Investment income is up just due to the rates are holding higher than what we assumed on our investment income. Other income is slightly higher than what we budgeted. It's due to a large payment we received from Tejon Ranch associated with an agreement that goes back to about 3,100 acre feet of the Dudley water that they transferred to AVAC. Under that agreement, they have to reimburse AVAC for all of our state water project costs associated with that 3,100 acre feet every year.
That's the sites, right?
No, it's not sites. It's in addition to sites.
Okay.
Yeah. Capacity charges, we assumed 0 for the year, but we've already received about 2.6 million during that first 6 months. So you can see operating revenues are pretty high at 72% versus the assumed 50% for half the year. A big portion of that is, as I mentioned, due to the Tejon Ranch payment. And then on the non-operating expense side, we have our state water contract that we pay through the statement of charges every month to DWR. And then we have the interest and fees only on the on AVAC's bonds. We have 2 outstanding bond issues. One is the 2016 water revenue bond, and the other one is the 2017 Krebs bonds for the solar project. So again, this is just interest only and fees on that.
Are we gonna pay some principal on that, or?
Yeah, we pay, good question, Director Lane. So we pay principal, is it once a year or twice a year, Teresa? Once a year. And that comes directly out of reserves. So it doesn't show up on this report.
So when's it gonna be paid off?
Both the 2016 Krebs will be paid off in 2036, and the Krebs be paid off in 2037.
Thank you.
Next slide just gives you an overall shot of total revenue. We're at 67% of where we should be on the budget versus 50. And expense side, we're just under the 50% mark. So overall, we're doing really good from a budget standpoint. Up on revenues and down on expenses.
Always a good thing.
Yeah. That's all I have to report, and we're looking for a motion to accept and file.
Thank you, Matt. So the motion for AB1.
I'll make a motion on AB1 to accept and file the revenue and expense report for the second quarter of fiscal year 24-25.
Motion by Director Donato, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Director Mercy, do we have a second? There's no further discussion or comments. Madam Secretary?
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, brings us to item 8B2. Consider possible action to accept and file the check register list of period of January 18th, 25 through January 29th, 25. And again, Matt's going to give us.
All right. Thank you, Director Donato. So on page 18 is the beginning of the check run for this period. We went through this with Finance Committee last week. We don't have a payment to DWR, so that's a good thing this period. That's why the total check run is a little lighter than normal. Hit the highlights. I'm trying to think if we discussed anything. I think it was pretty light. So, I mean, obviously the committee had questions, but nothing jumps out at me. Does the board have any questions on any of the items?
If there's no questions, will be in order, the motion will be in order.
I'll make a
motion. This is Keith.
I'll second.
Director Dias and Director Donato. There's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried.
Okay.
Item,
Eight
eight
B
D three.
A consider possible action resolution R-25 09, designating signatories for Computer Share Trust Company.
All right, so I'll take this item. So on page 23 is the proposed resolution R 25-09. Very similar to what we approved at the last meeting. We just didn't have this one quite ready at the last meeting. So if you recall, we, with the board officer change of vice president seat, we have to update the signatories on our on our computer share trust company. So this is the trustee for the two outstanding.
Thank you. Item eight D three, we have a motion.
A second.
Director Mercy, was there a second?
Second.
Director Miller. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Item eight D four.
Yes, consider possible action on resolution R-25 08, authorizing AVAC's water agency to provide water quality, laboratory testing services to California Department of Parks and Recreation, and our laboratory manager, where it's here.
Good morning, good evening, directors. So every 2 years, California Department of Parks and Recreation requests a bid from the agency to perform laboratory testing services. This bid is based on a fee per sample of raw and treated water. This is included in your board packets. These fees are consistent with all fees charged to our lab customers, and we last adjusted these in 2023. Staff reviews these fees annually, and we find that they're sufficient to cover our time and expenses, while also remaining competitive with the surrounding laboratories. So this contract between AVEC and Cal Parks would provide laboratory income of up to $8,800 for a 2-year period from March 2025 to March 2027. Cal Parks has requested a resolution from AVEC to continue the agreement. And with that, staff and the Finance Committee recommend approval of Resolution R 2508.
Mr.
Okay.
President, I move approval.
Motion from Director Parrish. Second. Second from Director Van Dam.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further comments or
Thank you.
questions. Okay, Madam Secretary, get a roll call.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yeah.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Yeah, thank you much, Director Donato. That moves us down to the Executive Committee, and we have one item that's regarding Antelope Valley Water Storage LLC in Willow Springs, the water bank. And Director Thompson, you have a presentation on that?
Yes. Yes, I do. Thank you. All right, next slide. All right. So the executive committee and staff recommend approval of this agreement. It's a reimbursement and data sharing agreement with Antelope Valley Water Storage. You'll previously remember that we had entered an MOU with CIM, who owns the Willow Springs Water Bank, and their subsidiary is this Antelope Valley Water Storage. Part of that MOU was developing a series of agreements. The first of those agreements is a reimbursement agreement to AVEC for their time and expenses on collaborating on bringing this Willow Springs Water Bank project forward. The executive committee was very clear that they wanted some indemnifications. And so as part of this, we added on a indemnification portion to cover the data sharing, just so we know that if we provide data to
Antelope Valley Storage Group, they aren't going, no one will sue us for any of the information that we provided to them. They will indemnify us. And so we've gone through this. We've also provided it to our council, and we feel like it's a very solid reimbursement and data sharing agreement. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you have before you consider approval.
The board has already agreed on that original agreement a number of months ago. Okay, is there any questions on the board?
Just one quick question of our council, that agreement does not include attorney fees provision, is that right?
That's correct.
That is correct.
That is correct?
Yeah.
So you know my mantra regarding attorney's fees provision.
Yes, and you know mine, so I just want to make sure, okay.
First thing we look for in
First thing I talked about during the interview. Good.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be pretty careful from now on out. Okay, if there's no further questions, the board order would be in. We have a
Mr. President,
motion.
move on 8C1.
Okay, we have a motion, a board order.
I'll second.
8C1, and we have a second. If there's no further, Director Mercy, we have a no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Yeah, thank you much, Peter, and we'll move on to Personnel Committee, and that's Director Paris. Turn it over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. We had an exciting Personnel and Legal Committee meeting the other day and considered items AD1 and AD2. And with that, and AD1 is a very interesting subject that our board or our committee unanimously was in favor of, just to give you the lead to it. And now I'll let Matt present it to you.
All right. Thank you, Director Paris.
You're welcome.
So in your packet on page 45 is staff report. And then also attached to the staff report is the organizational structure that highlights the changes that we're proposing this evening. So it's a little small on the screen, but we'll just walk through them here. So there's a total of kind of 3 changes that we're proposing. The first change consists of 2, what we'll call reclassification of 2 existing employees. The first one is executive assistant. So with the recent departure of Pam Clark from the agency, it left an opening there for the executive assistant position. So we're recommending to move an existing employee that's currently the administrative assistant into the vacant executive assistant position. And that position will report directly to the general manager and serve as a backup to Holly Hughes. And it also, looking out in the future, even though it's a long ways off, when Holly does retire, it does provide some succession planning for the agency to make sure we have somebody in place there. So the salary range is what we call salary range 40, and we've all reviewed salary ranges over the years. So it provides a little bit of a bump for the person that is going to move into this position and provides that individual growth to expand in the future. The next position is water resource planner. So with the elimination of the admin assistant position that we just talked about, we'd like to create a water resource planner position. This position will report directly to the water resource manager and the assistant general manager. They're both tasked with tracking and analyzing imported water supplies and local water supplies for the agency, including our bank supplies and groundwater rights, return flows, customer deliveries, etc. And we're proposing a salary range of 51. And this position will also provide some backup and succession planning for the water resource manager. Any questions on those 2? Again, these are not new bodies. These are just reclassifications of existing employees.
Is this the recommendation of the personnel committee?
There's, yes, it
There's more
is.
to come.
There's more to come, though. There's more in the presentation. And one thing, since you asked, that I'll throw in there, our committee is real concerned, well, not concerned, we're real happy with the succession planning that Matt and Peter have been doing for the agency. And we promote that a lot within our committee, and a lot of agencies don't do that, as we all know, and a lot of businesses don't do that. But Matt and Peter are doing a tremendous job at succession planning, looking at the future and growing our staff. So just throw that in.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
All right. We got one more topic, and this is an additional body or person for the agency. So this would be a new position. And the position is accounting tech 1/2. The 1/2 depends on the qualifications and background of the individual that would ultimately fill this job. And it's going to basically support the workload of the finance department, which we all know Teresa does a great job. And with things increasing for the agency when it comes to water banking and the complexity of tracking all the bank supplies and, the program we have going with Metropolitan Water District during construction, it'd be nice for Teresa to have some help in those areas. And this position could also support the Antelope Valley Water Master as we move with the agency continuing with the administrative role for the Water Master. This person could help with the accounting and billing of the Water Master invoices.
And are you going to thank Julie Kyle for this position?
And some of the time associated with this new person would be reimbursed by the Water Master. So, and then it also provides backup and future succession planning for the finance department. Teresa also has many years left, but it's not too early to start planning for that. And the recommended salary range is the same as our existing accounting technician position. We do have one individual that's already performing a lot of these duties. And that salary range is either a 24 for the technician 1 or 27 for the technician 2. And again, the placement will depend on the qualifications.
Matt, you said we already have someone?
We have one person that does that job now. So this would be an additional person to support
And that one person assists Teresa.
Correct.
But we need 2 people.
That we're recommending 2 people. And some of it is to provide separation of duties regarding accounting practices to make sure there's not crossover there.
I'm not sure you heard, well, I'm not sure if your question was answered. We have Teresa, we have one accounting technician 1 right now, and this would be a second position. So we'll have 2 accounting technician 1, or depending on the qualifications of this person we hire, it could be accounting technician 2. Is that what you're asking? Thanks.
All right. So personnel committee and staff have some recommendations. They're all listed on the screen there. Approve the attached org chart that's in your board packet. Approve salary range of 40 for the executive assistant position. Approve the job description, which is also in your board packet for the water resource planner, with a salary range of 51. And lastly, approve the addition of 1 accounting technician position.
And this would all be covered under Board Order 8D1?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. President, I move approval of Board Order 8D1.
We have a motion by Director Parrish.
I'll second
Motion second by Director Donato. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary, in the roll call, please.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
it. Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Now, Mr. President, on 8D2, we will have Matt give the presentation, and again, this was unanimous, recommended by our committee, and if you have any questions, Matt and I will try to answer those. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Director Paris. So in your board packet on 53, page 53 is a brief staff report. I don't have a presentation or a slide this evening. So this item is for the board to authorize management staff and or directors attend online negotiating training seminars. So if you recall, a year and a half ago, the board authorized some in-person training back on the East Coast. We all know that adds additional expense, having to travel and hotel, et cetera, and attend in person. So we're interested in expanding that to some of the management staff and directors, but we'd like to pursue online courses. So kind of cut down on the travel expense associated with attending these classes. When we presented this to the personnel committee, we kind of honed in on the Harvard Law School training. But since then, we've kind of done some research at the direction of President Lane to look at other online programs. So we've done that, and they're all kind of comparable in cost, right, range in $1,500 per class to $2,000 roughly per class. And it's a multi-day online seminar or training exercise. So we're seeking this approval from the board this evening to support authorization to allow management staff and or directors to attend these online courses as we see fit.
And I'm looking at the Harvard, again, Cornell. Is that
Cornell?
Cornell.
Yeah.
Also, I think we should include Pepperdine Strauss Institute as one of the top-rated negotiation, mediation groups in the country, along with Harvard. So I think
that's fine.
While we're talking about, we should include that.
All right.
It's gotta save money on, I mean, you're not flying anywhere, so you gotta save money for that.
Yeah, and hotels,
right off the bat.
meals, etc.
But it makes total sense.
Yeah.
With today's facilities.
Technology, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And I would say if we find that there's seminars that we have to travel to, and not all seminars online anymore, I think, the personnel committee would look at those, but we're seeing some really good ones online, and it just made sense that we move in that direction. And if there's ones that come up that we have to go to, I think we'll bring that to your consideration too, but thanks.
Now, Rob, do you really think you need help negotiating?
I just want to make it available for all of our other board members.
Okay, thank you.
But I appreciate the question, George.
Okay.
So do we need action on this, or?
We do.
Need a motion?
Okay, I will move approval of board item number 8D2.
Director Parrish, you have a motion?
I'll second.
Second by Director
And
Member.
that is with the inclusion of the Pepperdine Strauss.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got it.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Okay, thank you.
That concludes our personnel committee report and items. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to the General Manager's report. Matt?
All right. Thank you, President Lane. So GM report is short and sweet this evening. We've had a lot of fun tonight. So got one slide about upcoming events. We have our association or Antelope Valley State Water Contractors Association meeting on Thursday of this week here at Avek and on Zoom. We have agency holiday next Monday, the 17th. Next week, we also have the Water Master Advisory Committee at 10 a.m. on the 19th. That's on Zoom or at Quartz Hill Water District. Following week, we have the Water Master Board meeting here at AVAC or on Zoom at 10 a.m. And then earlier, Director Mercy mentioned that he and Director Miller are attending the Aqua Washington, D.C. conference. So there's information that you'd like them to pass along to our representatives. Got a couple weeks to do that. So that's all I have to report unless you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any reports from Matt, General Manager? Any comments or questions? Okay, ma'am, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Director's reports? Attorney reports?
Nothing reported.
Thank you. Request for future agenda items? Okay. We do have a closed session,
We do.
closed session item number B in C.
B and C.
And so we need a motion to adjourn to closed session and we'll take a 5-minute break.
Mr. President, I move we adjourn to closed session.
Director Parrish, you have a motion?
I'll second.
Director Miller, a second. Madam Secretary?
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yeah.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you.